The 2023 AFL season is nearly upon us, and it's that time of year where fans and commentators alike decide to predict the AFL ladder, where they make calls on who will rise, fall, and stay around the same mark, and then later find out that they either got their calls really correct or they're absolutely wrong. I'm Kevin, and today I'm going to be going through my 2023 AFL ladder predictions. And yes, there will be some bold calls because no two ladders are the same. So sit back and enjoy as I go through my ladder predictions and why I've put each team where. In 18th spot, and it's been a toss-up between this and another team, but I've got Hawthorn. Look, I don't like putting Hawthorn in this spot because they are a very competitive side. But the problem is they're too young. They've lost so much experience over the off-season. O'Meara, Mitchell, Gunston, Shields, Howe. And I think that's really going to hurt Hawthorn in the short term. And I just don't think they're going to have enough legs to see out a lot of games. They'll be competitive at the start, but then towards the end, they will fall away, in my opinion. And in 17th spot, I've got North Melbourne. They could get 3 wooden spoons in a row, and I won't be surprised, but surely they don't. Surely with Alistair Clarkson in, he just takes the side just to get a few more wins. I mean, they've got some decent recruits, but okay, I guess. Tucker, Logue, Howe, Shields. But their list is still quite inexperienced and there isn't a lot of upside in the short term, and I think it's still going to be another long year for North. In 16th spot, I've got Essendon because, let's face it, if their own club has no faith in their playing list, why should I? Oh, we're not ready. We're too young. But is that the sort of mentality Craig McRae applied to Collingwood last year? Actually, I reckon if Craig McRae was coaching Essendon, I reckon they would make finals because they've got enough talent to do so. But if they're going to go in 2023 with that sort of mentality, then I'm not even going to bother analysing their list. Because you know what? Half the performance comes up here. If they're going to be negative all season, then they're going to have a negative outcome. In 15th spot, I'm back in the West Coast Eagles to have a bit of a better season. Because they've been a bit fitter this year. Injuries and COVID did play a part in their 2-win year last year. And they look a lot more fit. They get a few of their experienced stars back. And I think that'll just help them get a few more wins on the board, particularly at home. They're not overly impressive. They don't have a lot of young talent and they're an aging squad. But I reckon they might just get a few more wins than the 2 wins they got last year. In 14th spot, I've got a side which many think will improve, but I'm not sold on this side, and that's Port Adelaide. I don't know why. I'm not a big fan of their list at the moment. They are very notorious for being flat-track bullies, and their fixture is actually quite difficult. It has Richmond, Geelong, Bulldogs, and Collingwood as their double-up matches. And plus the pressure that's being applied to Ken Hinkley at the moment. Usually, he has a good season when pressure's applied to him, but I'm not entirely sure if this is going to be a good year for Port Adelaide. And that sentiment's been reinforced by losing to both the Eagles and Dockers in pretty convincing fashion in the preseason. So, I've got Port Adelaide sliding. In 13th spot, I've got St Kilda because injuries are going to take a huge toll on them. In the preseason, they've already lost Membry, Billings, King, Allison, Hayes, and their forward line in particular has been the worst hit. So I can't see them scoring many goals this year. I mean, they only scored 67 in their preseason hit out. I just think they're going to have a poor start to the year, and I think it's going to be hard for the Saints to recover from there. Now, in 12th spot, I've got my first big slider, and that's the Sydney Swans, coming off an 81-point loss in the grand final. It seems that every team that gets thrashed in the grand final seems to miss the finals the next year. Unless you're the Dogs, and that's only because of a Carlton collapse. And look, Sydney are a young side, and I think people forget that they were quite vulnerable before they won 9 straight games to make the grand final. I mean, they lost to Essendon and a couple of other really stupid sides. And I think they are quite young, and I think it is going to hit them, that big grand final loss. Plus, they've also got a very difficult fixture. They've got Freo, Geelong, Melbourne, and Richmond twice. Plus the Suns, who they cannot seem to beat for their life. And also, by the way, I've gone through Squiggle several times, and every time I go through that, Sydney's losing their last 6 games. So I think in particular they're going to have a poor finish to the year. In 11th spot, I've got the Adelaide Crows. Unlike Port Adelaide, I actually see a very positive sentiment at Adelaide. They seem very competitive and they've had a very good preseason, culminating with wins against both the Eagles and Dockers in pretty convincing fashion. They've got Isaac Rankin, which will help them with their forward line woes, and I think Darcy Fogarty is set for a breakout year. And I think the Adelaide Crows are going to be very competitive this year and tough to beat at home. I do think they'll be right in the finals mix for the entire year, and I think going into round 24 will be a mathematical chance to make finals. But I just think their lack of experience and their young list means they're going to choke in the games that matters most, and I think the Crows are just going to choke and miss the finals. But I reckon they'll make it in 2024. I reckon this will be the last year they miss finals. In 10th spot, I've got Collingwood, just because I can't really see them backing up their season from last year. Partly because they're quite a young list, and we've seen teams such as the Bulldogs and Melbourne back in like 2016 and 18 not being able to back up really strong seasons. And I just sense Collingwood are in that position. Don't get me wrong, I think their overall trend is that they're improving. They got Tom Mitchell, who's going to be a big inclusion in their midfield. But I just think with a harder draw, they do have to play Geelong, Brisbane, and a very hungry Carlton twice. Although they have a good record against the Blues, but I think they'll be a bit hungrier. I just think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Collingwood to repeat the season they had last year. And in 9th spot, just missing the top 8, I've got the Dockers. Partly because of a hard fixture, they have to play Brisbane, Sydney, Geelong, and the Dogs twice. They'll win some of those games, but not all of them. And I just think with the Dockers, they're a youngish side. I think they're just going to slide a little bit. They'll obviously be right in the season for the whole year, but I don't know. I just think they're going to be unlucky this year, and it might be more of a season of learning from them. And I think after that, then they'll be quite strong from like 2024 onwards, but I think this is just going to be a bit of a step back for Fremantle. In 8th spot, I'm going to make a giant call, and yes, I'm putting GWS in the 8. What? How? They just lost to Ransom and Hopper, they lost their coach, and they finished 16th last year. What am I thinking? Yes, what am I thinking? But that's the thing. They've got a new coach in Adam Kingsley, who I think is going to be very motivational for the Giants to really improve this year. And they've still got a lot of talent on that list. Let's not forget. They've got Kelly, Cornelio, Whitfield, Green. Plus they've got Tom Green and Finn Callahan, former two top 10 picks, who I think are going to be breakout stars in their midfield this year. I think Jesse Hogan will have a good year. And Sam Taylor is also, he's going to be an All-Australian soon. I think there's still a lot of upside with this Giants side, which people forget. I mean, they only made finals 2 years ago. And I think with a bit of an easier draw, they do get free hits against Essendon and Hawthorn. I actually think the Giants might do enough to secure the top 8. I can also see them finishing bottom 4. Don't get me wrong. But when you're trying to think of teams that no one expects that make the 8, I reckon Giants are one of those sides that could be that. In 7th spot, I've got the Western Bulldogs. I reckon their list is a lot more balanced this year compared to previous years. Yeah, they did lose Dunkley and Hunter, but I do think they are surplus midfielders. Well, okay, you'd probably rather keep Dunkley than, let's say, a McRae, for example. But you know what I mean? Like, they've got a lot of midfielders already. So losing Dunkley and Hunter isn't going to hurt them that much. Plus, they've also shored up their key stock positions. They've gone ahead and got Rory Lobb and in the forward line and Liam Jones in the back line. Particularly their back line was struggling last year, so Jones is going to be a very good inclusion for the Dogs. I reckon they're a lot more balanced this year, and look, I see them having a tough start to the year. I reckon they'll be 2-4, but I reckon after that they've got a pretty kind draw for the rest of the year, and they can build momentum in the back half of the year and make the finals. In 6th spot, I'll put the Suns there. I think this is the year they're gonna make finals. They've got Ben King back, and I think the Suns, they were quite competitive last year for most parts of the year, and I reckon they'll just improve and take that next step to make the finals this year. They've got a decent enough fixture to do so, get free hits against North Melbourne Saints, plus they should beat the Crows at home. I do have question marks about the Suns' resilience, and I do think they're going to lose some very stupid games that no one expects them to lose. But I also think they're going to win some games that no one expects them to win either. And I think, look, it's been 12 years since the Suns missed finals. They've got a lot of young talent on that list, and surely they just capitalise on that this year and make the finals for the first time. And I think that's going to happen. In 5th spot, I've got Richmond just missing the top 4. I think they're in for a big year. They did get Taranto and Hopper, which is going to shore up their midfield, which has traditionally been one of their weak points. So I think they're going to have a very strong midfield. They've already got a very strong forward line. I reckon Tom Lynch will win the Coleman this year. My only concern about Richmond is their back line. They do seem to be a bit shaky with defence, and also their ability to close out close games is a bit questionable. And I just think the teams I'm putting above them just have a little bit more polish and quality. But I think Richmond, they're going to have a strong year this year, and they're going to be back in premiership contention. Look, I've got to put someone that missed the finals to go into the top 4 this year, and that someone's going to be Carlton. They should have been in the 8 last year. They didn't make the 8 in the most dubious of circumstances. And I think just like Melbourne in 2018, well, I know Melbourne finished 5th, but they made the prelim. Just like Melbourne in 2018, where they were very hungry to have a big year after finishing 9th in 2017, and also very stupid circumstances. I think Carlton are going to do the same thing. They've got a very talented midfield, very talented forward line with 2 Coleman medalists. Their defence is a bit shaky, admittedly, but I think overall, the Blues are in for a big year. In 3rd spot, I've got Geelong dropping off slightly, just for the reason that they've lost their inspirational skipper in Joel Selwood. And I do think that given they won the premiership last year, I just see them losing the hunger a little bit in some, really big games, like when they're playing Brisbane or Melbourne. I don't know if they're going to have that hunger, and I feel like they're going to drop a few games here and there. I still think they're going to be very good this year. I mean, they went ahead and got some good young players in Tanner Bruhn and Jack Bowles as well. So they've had a very successful trade period nonetheless, but I just think... they'll lose a little bit of hunger, and they won't make top 2 for that reason. In 2nd spot, I've got Melbourne. Gee, if they didn't already have enough elite players, they just have to go get more. You know what? Teams like North Melbourne and Hawthorn would love what Melbourne got in the off-season. They don't even need him. They got Brodie Grundy, the 2nd best ruckman in the comp behind Gawn, and plus they've got Lockie Hunter, who in 2020 was a top 10 midfielder. So, Melbourne have a lot more depth this year. I do think off-field issues played a part with the D's decline last year. I can't see them having as bad of a year as they had last year. They still finished 2nd nonetheless. So I think Melbourne, they're going to be right up in premiership contention yet again with some of their off-season recruits. But I don't think anyone has had a better off-season than the Brisbane Lions, who I'm backing to win their first minor premiership. Not only they got Josh Dunkley and Jack Gunston in the trade period, but they also got Will Ashcroft, who, despite finishing 4th last year, got pick number 2 because of the father-son rule. What a bargain for Brisbane. Not only that, but they also got Connor McKenna, who was a decent Essendon defender, at the Lions for nothing. So, the Brisbane Lions, they're looking better than ever, and I reckon this is the year they're going to take the next step and finally win their first minor premiership and make the grand final. Just quickly, I will go through my finals predictions. So I've got Brisbane beating Carlton and Melbourne beating Geelong in the qualifying finals. Meanwhile, I reckon Richmond are going to beat the Giants, and Gold Coast will shock the Dogs to make their first semi-final. But I do think the Suns will, however, lose to Geelong. Meanwhile, I think Carlton are going to go out in straight sets and lose to Richmond, who make the prelim. There, Brisbane will be able to beat Geelong pretty convincingly. Meanwhile, Melbourne will also beat Richmond to set up for a Brisbane-Melbourne grand final. And I've got Melbourne winning their 2nd premiership in 3 years at the MCG. And now for my individual awards predictions. I reckon Touk Miller is going to win the Brownlow medal, because if the Suns are going to play finals, I reckon that's going to be off the back of Touk Miller. I know Paddy Cripps won it last year with Carlton finishing 9th, but I think Touk Miller will lead the Suns to finals. For the Coleman medal, as I said earlier, I reckon Tom Lynch is going to have a big year and kick a lot of goals for Richmond. While in the Rising Star, I think Will Ashcroft will win it. I know it's an easy one, but let's not overthink this. He is looking one of the most impressive at the moment from the 2022 draft crop. So, these are my AFL ladder and award predictions for 2023. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. Comment what you thought of the video down below, and comment what you thought of my predictions. Check out some of my other videos, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.